Dello heavy-duty engine oils. Proven engine protection at prices you can rely on, giving you even more reasons to choose Dello. Today, we dive even deeper into the world of oil testing. Why is cleanliness so essential, and why is contamination such a bad thing? Here to tell us more is Shelley with Chevron, and she's going to break it all down for us. Shelley, thank you so much for being back on the dirt. It's good to see you again.
It's nice to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. So my first question is, we're talking about oil sampling again. And for a lot of smaller contractors in particular, I think there's this kind of mysticism behind why we have to be so clean. Why do we need to be clean and precise when we take these oil samples? Is just a little bit of contamination really going to mess it up that bad?
Yeah, yes. My great example is the fact that when you take an oil sample in a dirty environment, right? If you take the cap and you place it upwards, dirt particles can get onto that inside top of the cap, right? And then when you put the cap back on the bottle, that dirt will get into the sample and the lab can and will detect it. Best practice is to take the bottle cap off, put it down without putting it upwards, right? Or hold it in your hand while you're taking the sample, then put it back on as quickly as possible.
So we're not even talking like sprinkling some dirt across the lid. We're literally talking the dust particles in the air just from you being in a dusty environment are enough to change that sample?
That's correct.
Wow, that's an incredible level of detail.
Well, what the lab is measuring is particles that are smaller than the human hair. That's why. If dirt shows up and it's not aggressive, you'll get a report back saying silicon is at elevated level, right? Because that's what silicate is dirt. No abrasive wear reported. Review sample technique.
Gotcha. So the lab will actually give you a little slap on the wrist telling you that you need to do a better job.
Typically, right?
My next question has to do with labeling and record keeping. I also think there's a good portion of people that kind of go, well, if I slap a red label on the skid steer and a blue label on the excavator, that's good enough. And the lab will kind of take care of the rest. Is that reality, or what does it look like on my end? What do I need to do?
You have to communicate with the laboratory. So the paperwork, whether that's a form or a label, you have to give them the information in order to properly diagnose the sample. Like, for example, the engine make and model, the hours on the engine, the hours on the oil, the date taken, and definitely, obviously, the unit ID. And you have to be consistent with that unit ID every time. Otherwise, it'll separate your sample history. When it comes to making sure that you provide the engine make and model, there are different limits of what the diagnostician looks at and wear tolerances by OEM, right? And then on top of that, if there's more hours than typical, or less hours than typical, that also changes the perspective of how critical an abnormality is.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming if you get those unit numbers incorrect and you separate the history that's going on, we've talked in the past that trend analysis is one of the most critical aspects of this whole process, because that's allowing us to track what's going on with that machine. And what you're saying is, if my labeling is incorrect or improper, now it's my fault that we no longer have that trend analysis for my particular piece of equipment?
That's correct. That's correct. So if you're not filling out the paperwork correctly, we call it garbage in, garbage out. And then you're going to be wasting money sending a sample into the lab that lab can't truly do justice to your diagnostics interpretation, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
So this is where I play the small excavating contractor role. And I say, Shelley, this sounds like it takes way too much time to pull this really official clean sample, and then I got to do all this record keeping and everything. Is that reality? Is it going to take me forever to do this, or is this a pretty quick procedure once you kind of get it down? But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants.
These cranes work around the clock for months at a time. If one of these engines ever goes down, it costs more than our reputation. Switching to Dello 600 ADF, it's been a game changer. We've had no issues with clogged DPFs. I mean, no regen lights, no cleaning, no replacements, nothing. This oil goes beyond anything we've ever used. I choose proven protection that keeps our cranes on the job. I choose Dello 600 ADF.
This sounds like it takes way too much time to pull this really official clean sample, and then I got to do all this record keeping and everything. Is that reality? Is it going to take me forever to do this, or is this a pretty quick procedure once you kind of get it down?
Once you get started, it's pretty easy procedure, right? I have an example that happened the other day that there's a group of samples that came in. They didn't have the proper paperwork. One of the samples had a contamination of water in it. It wasn't even sent in from the shop where the truck was at. We have no idea. We got a truck that's got water in it, and we have no idea which one it is. So that means that everything that was sampled on that day is going to have to be resampled. The correct paperwork needs to be filled out. So you're doing the double effort, right? So it takes you a few minutes to fill out the forms. Or even you can do it online. You can log in and register your sample that's coming in. That way the lab knows it's coming in too.
So once you get it down, it's a pretty straightforward process. At a very high level, can you walk us through what a good testing protocol would be for us to go just pull an oil sample from our skid steer? What should that look like for it to be done properly?
Ideally, you would use gloves, right? But as long as your hands are clean, just can take a sample. But if you've been like working on the piece of equipment and you have gear oil or you have engine oil all over your hands from another engine, you touch that oil sample and you're going to contaminate it with just your hands. So it's better to have your hands clean to do it.
And just to clarify, when you say touch the oil sample, what you really mean is the little testing jar that they give you. If you touch anywhere on the inside, the rim, or the lid, anywhere that the oil is going to come into contact with that container, if you touch that, you now have put contamination on that surface. So as long as we've got greasy, nasty wrench hands and we're keeping them on the outside of the vial we're using, we're in good shape, right?
As long as you're on the outside of the vial. But the second, if you're, once you take the cap and putting it onto the bottle, it depends on where that sample, how high that sample is. The likelihood that you could touch it by just screwing the cap back on is possible.
So clean gloves.
Clean gloves, clean hands. It's not, you don't have to do both. It's one or the other. And if it's not practical for the gloves, then don't use them. Just make your hands clean, right? I was on site with a blender. I don't want to get too technical in here, but he was bringing up hydraulic samples to have tested for a particle count, which is in very small particles. And he would come into the lab and he'd have, he was working on equipment. So he had stuff up and down his arms. And I would tell him it's going to fail. I'd run the particle count and it would fail. So there is a thing about making sure your hands are clean because you don't want to waste anybody's time. But I had another sample a group of samples I was diagnosing one time that it was back-to-back coolant leak, which is highly unlikely for having, 5-10 samples from the same company having a coolant leak. Well, only to find out that the technician forgot to take the samples, knows he was supposed to take the samples, so he took the samples all from the same sump. And it happened to be the truck that had the coolant leak. So they all came into the lab and we didn't know which one it was, right? So there is a reason why there's testing. It's not just the health of the equipment, it's to help maintain the equipment and trade or sell the equipment going forward. Or I have a leasing company that just smelled like gasoline, right? Coming out of one of the fuel tanks, and the other fuel tank that kind of smelled a little bit like gasoline. So we sent it into the lab, and I asked them to do a Penske Martin closed cup flash point, and the one sample flashed at 78 degrees, which is clearly gasoline, because gasoline can flash at room temperature. And the other one flashed at 150, which typically diesel will flash anywhere between 125 and 180. So it was fine. It probably had a little bit of gasoline in it, but it resulted in a $50,000 repair work. So we just needed to know, was it really gas? And it was a leased piece of equipment that was coming back. So you just want to be careful.
Interesting. Yeah. So this really doesn't take a long time. It's just you need to be regimented about it. It sounds like this is not something you just kind of, I'll grab a sample real quick as it's dripping out. No. It needs to be something that's well thought out and planned But at the same time, it's really, I would say, 5 minutes all in on pulling a sample, especially if you've already got your equipment registered and you're just getting online to print a label.
Yes. So it's not that difficult to take a sample. And once you've done it, it becomes routine, right? But the benefit of taking these samples and taking that short window of time, it gives you the health of the equipment. You're being proactive and not reactive. Because if you are not looking at that piece of equipment and then you have a piece of downed equipment, then you're dealing with labor costs, part costs, no job value because that piece of equipment is not moving. We're looking for bearing wear and bushing wear and camshaft. All of these things have different metallurgy, which is what the lab is testing for.
So that kind of leads me into my final question, which is kind of, why is this so important? Why is it so important to be so clean with these, to keep labeling appropriate and everything? What are we ultimately looking for outside of you just saying, yep, Bryan, you can let your oil go for another, 100 or 200 or 500 hours?
We are looking to make sure that that piece of equipment is being kept clean, no coolant contamination, no fuel dilutions, no dirt, maintaining the viscosity, because if the viscosity is thickening, it can cause the engine to work harder and creating wear, right? But again, the bottom line is trying to make sure that that piece of equipment is being kept on the road and you are able to plan maintenance versus react to it.
Perfect. Well, Shelley, as always, thank you so much for all the information. And we will talk to you here soon about more oil testing or coolant. Who knows where the future leads us?
I appreciate the time, Bryan.
Well, thank you again for Shelley coming on the show just to give us an idea of why cleanliness is so important. And as you can see, it doesn't take hardly any contamination at all, and you've totally ruined your oil sample. So I hope this helps you in your business. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Dirt.